Hey everybody, it's Joe Trippi and welcome back to That Trippi Show. This week, well, that was fun, wasn't it? We'll get into one hell of a debate performance from Kamala Harris, and Trump just totally lost it. And what it all means. Heads up, this week, Alex is off right now helping one of our congressional candidates try to win back the House. He's actually on a shoot for some commercials we're making. Today I invited Trygve Olson back to talk about the debate and the fallout. Trygve, welcome.
Thanks for having me on, Joe. It's good to, I don't know if I can fill Alex's shoes, but I'm glad I'm here.
Yeah, well, it's a different thing because Alex kind of like, no, but he kind of like drives the show a lot. Like he kind of like is at the wheel, asking the questions, pushing things along. And I actually, sometimes I think I don't let him talk enough. It's my own fault. So I apologize to that, listeners. But anyway, what's your take on the debate? What was it? I mean, obviously, Kamala knocked it out of the park, but just what did you think were the most important points that happened and your takeaway?
I'm guessing that my takeaways and how sort of I look at this and how you look at it are probably the same, which isn't the way necessarily that the people who aren't, as engaged in the process as we are and haven't sat like doing debate prep, right, for people. So when, at least on the Republican side, when I would always be looking at, back in my old days, going into a debate, I'd be saying to myself, all right, what does our candidate want to come out of this with? And what would be the ideal for the narrative to be about the other candidate? Like, and does what our candidate, in this case, Harris, does it help add something to voters' understanding compared to what they maybe thought going in? And with the other candidate, in this case, Trump, does it reinforce the things that they didn't like about the candidate going in? Right. And so if you go back to the what was so disastrous about the first debate between Trump and Biden was everybody who watched that debate who was concerned about Joe Biden's age went away from that debate more concerned about Joe Biden's age. Right. Yeah. And with this debate, people were going into the debate wondering, and our polling that we do with the Lincoln Democracy Institute bears this out, people were going in wondering about Harris, is she up to the job? And she passed that with flying colors. And, having watched a lot of politics, I thought Harris could do a good job. I did not think she had that debate performance in her. Like, that was really good, like historically. And Donald Trump ended up reinforcing all the things people didn't like about him, right? It reminded voters, to some degree, Donald Trump's debate performance was as bad for him politically as Joe Biden's was in the first one, that ultimately led to him having to leave the race. And the difference is there is no Nancy Pelosi. There are no adults on the Republican side who are saying to Donald Trump, you were a disaster.
Yeah. And he, of course, is out there talking about how he won with, and he's got different numbers, like 83-3, 72-6.
Right. But you know what I was wondering? This is what I was wondering, right? Like, you've been in that room where your guy did terrible in the debate, right? But Donald Trump world is such a freak show that I actually think there are probably some of the weirdos giving him like actually doing it. We're going to do a poll of ultra magas, and you won 92-2.
No, the real secret, though, to tell just how bad it was, having been there, is at least I've been through some debates where we just crushed our opponent. I've been also through them where you're sitting there, you're just watching appalled in the green room. You just can't believe that it was that bad. And the thing that you have every urge at that moment. Let me tell you, folks, when you're in that position, everything inside your body is just saying, crap, now I got to go out into the spin room and somehow like turn that thing around. And you're like this tremendous urge you have at that moment to say, "Now screw it, let's just send him in to spin it."
Right.
But in all the bad times, I still walked out there and took it. Right. But
right.
But what they did was they sent him out. That's when when he walked in there, you knew what was going on. Chris LaCivita, no, they didn't want to go out there. Let's send him out there and explain what the hell happened. Let him do it. I'm not going to go do that. And so it just, I was just cracking up when I learned that he was going to get, they were sending him into the spin room because you knew that's how bad it was. That's how 100%. Bad it was that they sent him in instead of like going out there and just doing their damn jobs. So, but she went in there, I think, clearly with the idea that she was going to be in charge, that she was going to be in control. Right. And she used different mechanisms to show that. I mean, by baiting him, yes, and he would fall for it. But by being loaded with the response when he did the, what you knew, the predictable Trump thing was going to happen. She like led him right into it. Right. And then, he'd walk himself into the door. It was it was really incredible. And I mean, like, the thing that stuck the most to me was the whole immigration thing, where here's something he should, obviously this is a place he wants to go. Right. And instead she gets him all off on, with the whole thing about people are leaving people aren't showing up, and the ones that are bored and they leave his rallies. And of course that just got him, and that they were falling asleep and leaving before the end. And that's what launched him into the whole debunked, insane claim that Haitian immigrants were stealing and eating pets in Springfield, Ohio. Right. I mean, instead we get from what should have been from his point of view. I mean, if you're his team, like a softball for him, and he couldn't get there. He couldn't.
But not only that, he literally wet himself. It wasn't, he gets the question he wants, and she somehow successfully got him to go and literally step on his own junk. Yeah. Like,
they're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats.
I know.
I mean, it was just, and then when Muir comes back and debunks it and says that theory's been debunked, he comes back, well, I saw it on TV, and then kept arguing with, I saw it on TV. Oh, okay.
And then J.D. Vance, did you see that Caitlin Collins light up J.D. Vance? J.D. Vance ended up having to spend 5 minutes talking about it because it's in Ohio. And he can't contradict Trump. So then he ends up saying, well, I'm a United States Senator from Ohio. If we get calls about concerns constituents are having, we have to investigate them. And she literally asks him, well, if you get calls from people suggesting, which, by the way, if listeners want to do this, I don't know J.D. Vance's Senate number, but you should call, if particularly from Ohio. She said, if you get calls from people who say they've saw Bigfoot, are you investigating and calling on the New York Times to investigate if Bigfoot is in Ohio? It was just like... It was totally nuts.
The whole thing was, just a complete. I mean, the contrast was, which I think was the other thing. They clearly went in wanting to show a contrast, but the contrast was, I think, even more pronounced. I mean, just in terms of, she was a president, you could see it, and she was presidential, and Trump was ranting and like literally deflating in front of. And unhinged. I mean, the rant about the meeting with the Taliban and Abdul, which I'm not even sure is really who he was talking about, or he knew what he was talking about. It was just an incredible like mishmash of, Orban loves me, crazy kind of stuff that, like you said, it just reminded people what they didn't like about him in the first place, or what bothered them. And she proved that she had it. But, the one thing, we can all talk about what we thought, but 67 million people watched that debate across 17 networks.
Right.
And millions more on streaming. That is an incredibly big audience that got to see this thing. I don't remember what the numbers were from the Biden-Trump debate, but
it was about 20 million more.
This one was 20 million more? Yeah.
Something like that.
And so I'm saying, like, it's like a huge thing. We know from some of the Instapoll stuff and some of the focus groups and dial tests that it was pretty universally viewed by people. I mean, not what you and I thought, but, in the CNN Instapoll, it had something like a 50-50-ish sample, 50% leaning Trump, 50% leaning Kamala Harris. And after the debate, when they went back to those people, it was 60 when asked who won and it was 63% said Kamala Harris won, 37% thought Trump had won. You just the same thing. A lot of the focus groups, huge gender gap, particularly during the dials. I think particularly on abortion when that came up as a subject.
So, as you know, we have panel research that we're doing with LDI and Lincoln Project, and as you'll find this fascinating. So we went in yesterday morning, and we're just finishing up with our panels. So, and we'll be putting more out about this, but I'll just share a couple of things. One, when we asked to describe, and this would be a balanced sample of the population of Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Arizona, right? So it'd be representative of them. So 47% of respondents described Kamala Harris's debate performance as extremely strong, 32.25, so basically 32% in addition referred to it as strong. When you compare that to Trump, and 64% of the people who watched it said they'd be more likely to support Harris after watching it.
Right.
Comparison to Trump, who it's 31% described it as extremely strong, 20% strong. So you're talking a huge gap on that, and less than 50% said that it made them more likely. In fact, the most responded to answer was no change on Trump. And so, it kind of gets to what it reinforces is, sort of what I was saying. You're looking at those expectations, who exceeded and who failed. Donald Trump didn't give his supporters anything to hang their hat on. And you're right. I mean, if you're, for listeners, and Joe is kind of alluding to this, there is no worse feeling because all the reporters who you're going to have to go and spin in the spin room are people that you've built up long-term credibility with. And quite frankly, in some cases, you'll go grab a drink with after.
Right.
And when it's so bad that you can't, and guys like Joe and I are pretty good at talking, when it gets to the point where you feel like you have nothing to hang your hat on, you're basically like, I can't help you. You go do the answering. And it's a miserable feeling.
Yeah, no. I was like, as soon as I saw that they sent him in, I was like, of course, it's easy to do with his ego, right? You just, hey, no, boss, you're the best we got. Go in there. You did great. And he goes charging out.
Exactly.
But that's not what was the motive. The motive was like, it's better you than me. I'm not going out there and explaining.
Well, the other thing that's funny when you're on the other side of that, right? When one of the candidates, your rival, has to do that, all the reporters rush to the candidate in the room because they're further up the food chain, and you're just sitting there laughing because you're like, I don't have to answer all these questions. This is awesome. Let that idiot over there have to answer to these questions because I don't have to try and explain away the unexplainable or even tout my guy.
Yeah, and so then with the great 1-2 punch of all time, Taylor Swift endorsing immediately after the debate.
Right. You can about imagine how that went with Ula and Kaya having, hey, my daughters, right? Like they were like, I went and woke them up to tell them.
My wife, my daughter, everybody's going crazy. So I was like, as was I. So that's great. But like, that thing went out to like 283 million people. It was like, you know. And of course,
you know what the thing about it is, though, that I found so interesting is Taylor Swift has created space for others. Did you see Linda Ronstadt's takedown today?
Yeah. So Linda Ronstadt's out there now. And you got, look, you know, I think it's got to be over 400,000 people now, you know, gone to vote.gov, the link she put up on on her endorsement to register to vote. I mean, you know, we got to remember, you know, Pennsylvania, Biden only won it by 44,000 votes. Georgia, you know, by 14, 15,000. Same in Arizona. 400,000, 500,000 Swifties registering to vote is, you know, can make a big difference in some of these very close states, which, by the way, may not be as close, even as close as we think right now. But we'll see. We're days away from having real solid numbers on a state by state basis. But
100%. It's
pretty, you know, like, you know, even after the Biden-Trump debate, Trump only got a 1.5 point bump out of that. I mean, I know everybody went into, oh my God, it's over, you know, all that. And, you know, obviously disappointed in Biden's performance, but it didn't really end up with much of a jump for Trump at all. I think some of that goes back to something you and I have been talking about the whole cycle, is that Trump's got a ceiling that's around 46% of the vote.
100%.
So, hey, Biden has a bad debate. It means Biden lost votes, but they didn't go to Trump. Very few of them. Right. Nothing really happened. Trump stayed in the same place he was. I'm not sure that happens with this situation. I think there's a good chance. We're starting to see some signs, I think, that Trump's vote ceiling was softening, was going a little lower, maybe towards 45-ish. It'll be interesting to see if this doesn't only end up being, you know, Kamala growing a little bit, but some of the energy that even the Trump base has, he may have lost some of that.
Well, so I have some data on that too. And I want to point this out because I know your listeners from Twitter, every time I come on, I get some of them. Every once in a while, I get some from the left who will take issue with things that I say. I know you'd be shocked by that. But then they like the fact that you and I are buddies. So I guess I passed the test. But they're really with endorsements, right? Like I had somebody who was asking me today about Alberto Gonzalez. And I actually had to pause and think, who the hell is Alberto Gonzalez, right?
He's the AG, former AG of the United States of America.
I know that, but I had to pause. And I'm pretty sure if I don't know my buddies back in Wisconsin who are Evers Johnson voters, they don't know either. But I'll tell you the two people that matter in this, and for different reasons. Taylor Swift's endorsement is gigantic, right? Like for the reasons you talked about, and like 400,000 people going to register. And I've seen data on Taylor Swift, and we've been working on some stuff that I think people with LDI are going to find fascinating about both the Swiftie movement and the MAGA movement and how they're different, but they're built along kind of the same factors. But Taylor Swift matters. But the other one that matters, to your point of what you were just talking about at Donald Trump's ceiling, is Dick Cheney. And Dick Cheney doesn't matter with 200 million people like Taylor Swift, but Dick Cheney matters, and we're seeing this in our data. So consistently, as you know, Joe, we look in terms of clusters of voters, and on the right, you have this cluster that is MAGA loyalists, and they're the really hardcore. They're the people we have to worry about on election day and the days after, right? They're the ones who are at the Capitol. But the other group is Republican loyalists. They're the rank and file.
Sure,
they long for the old party. So if you look at from the beginning of this race, when we set up the panels, Donald Trump has consistently gotten 95% of those Republican loyalists. He gets like 99% of the others. What we've seen since the convention is that drop to like 91-ish. Now they're not moving to Harris. They're basically saying I'm thinking seriously about not voting for Trump. That matters a lot in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin if those people hold. And Dick Cheney and Pat Toomey but particularly Dick Cheney matters a lot with those people. A lot.
Yeah, and we just got the first poll out as we're recording has come out. The Reuters Ipsos poll has Harris at 47, Trump at 42.
Right.
Again, I'm more paying attention to see whether, Trump, who's been in that 45, 46 range since the time he came down that escalator, got 46% in 2016, 46.7 in 2020. We all know those numbers. I say them over and over.
Right.
But if he drifts below, even lower, then, you're starting to see, again, remember in 2020, Biden got 51% of the vote. It sooner or later, as Harris lifts up, if he starts to decline, I think, again, we could be headed, it's going to take over 46 to win. Third parties just aren't as strong as they were in 2016. And so it's our first result. We'll see more. And I'm not sure what the change was over, from the last one.
Right.
On that poll. But interesting, their number on who won the debate, it was Harris 53%, Trump 24%. Again, remember, important thing about this is remembering that, okay, here's a guy who is at, even in their own poll, 42. So Trump's at 42. And literally half of his supporters, I mean, you have to figure this out, only 24% of people think he won. Well, wait, you're getting 42% of the vote. You're getting 24% who say they think you won. That means there's a ton of Trump supporters who are admitting in this poll that he did not win. And by the way, Harris, who was at 47 in their head-to-head number, 53% of people think she won. So there's Trump people who believe, who were with Trump. He's dropped to 42. They think she won the debate. I think you're right, Trygve. Combine that with things like Dick Cheney endorsing and supporting Harris, you start to see how this could erode him down off that ceiling of 46 that he has, and he could be looking at a 45 or 44 point ceiling. If that's the case, Harris is there. We just got to get everybody out. And it becomes a turnout game.
So this is the interesting thing. Did you read the Taylor? Obviously, you read it. The Taylor Swift endorsement, right? When I read that, having watched Miss Americana multiple times, because when you have teenage daughters, you do things like that, But I thought about her dad. Scott Swift, stockbroker from Philadelphia, obviously. He's a Republican, it's pretty clear, or was a Republican, but he's like a Dick Cheney kind of Republican, right? Like he's an old school Republican. My message for Taylor Swift, and honestly, if listeners want to take this and tweet it at her and her people, she needs to register voters. But what she also needs to do with the other female celebrities like her, and she's the 10,000-pound singer in the room. They need to be giving tools.
That was scary.
To their fans.
Yeah.
They need to be giving tools to their fans to how to have the conversation with their father. Taylor,
right.
You need to give the girls tools to have the conversation that you had with your dad in Miss Americana. Because we've done all kinds of research on that. If she starts to do that with Dobbs dads and those Republicans, she can change the world. She does that. And if you want, have your dad or somebody from your team reach out to Joe and I, you can look us up on Google. We're more than happy we have data on it. We can help you with that. But you have got to give those tools so that the conversation is about the values which led you to do your research, and saying to your dad, you gave me these values. You're not honoring them by backing Donald Trump.
Hey, so what I want to follow up on that, but while we were sitting here, Alex somehow, I don't know where he is on this shoot, but he texted me that among Republicans in that poll I was talking about, that Reuters Ipsos poll, when they asked just Republicans who won the debate in that poll, 53% thought Trump won. 31% thought no one won. These are Republicans, right? Harris got 14%. And so, when he asked the question, Joe, like only 53% of Republicans thought Trump won. That's pretty big, right? I mean, big as in a big problem. And he's right. Think about this. In a party where he can do no wrong, I mean, where, literally he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and he must have had a good reason. For 31% of the party to say no one won, he didn't win. I mean, no, he won in 2020. Remember, he won that election, but he didn't win this. 31% of his own party, actually more than that, because of the 14% admit that Harris won. It's just, it is a big deal to see that kind of weakening among, remember the gigantic number, 67 million people who watched it. And by the way, are still getting inundated with the coverage, which is almost universally positive for Harris and bad for Trump.
Except what makes that number more interesting, Joe, is this factoid. 68% of identified Republicans watch Fox News regularly. So under normal circumstances, the idea that he's below 68%, what was the number, 53?
Yeah.
That means there's 15% who are watching the propaganda network, who are still people like Jesse Waters, who are still trying to say Trump won and Harris lost. And they're like, it's a little bit, they're making kind of the mistake that the Biden campaign made, which was, no, he's in good physical shape after the debate. It just doesn't work when people have seen it with their own eyes. And that's where they are Fonzie jumping the shark here. They really are.
Well, the one reaction that I just think said it all was Chris Wallace on CNN. I mean, I worked with him when, I was with Karl Rove, and I would do analysis, and Chris would kind of be the moderator between, the anchor of our discussions. And I've always had a really deep respect for his ability to call them like he sees them. And Chris Wallace said, I didn't ever think I was ever going to witness a debate as devastating as the one you and Dana moderated back in June. He was talking about the debate that the CNN debate, when Joe Biden basically tanked his reelection campaign. I think tonight was just as devastating. I think that Kamala Harris pitched a shutout on almost every subject I can think of. She shut out Trump on abortion. She shut out Trump on January 6th and democracy. She shut him down on national security and turned to the former president and said, the military leaders who served with you think you're a disgrace. I mean, he kind of, in like a couple of sentences, captured exactly how bad this was for Trump and how strong her performance was. And, but the one thing, because I want our viewers, our listeners to understand this, can you briefly talk through Dobbs dads and why what you were saying about Taylor Swift? I mean, but describe Dobbs dads to them and why it's so important that what you were saying Taylor Swift should do is something that would matter a lot.
So there is a group of voters. They are comprised of Republicans, conservatives, and former Republicans. So they are right of center voters. And in states like Wisconsin, they're the voters who voted for Tony Evers and Ron Johnson. They have a tendency. Their conservatism is based on the idea they don't want government telling them what kind of shotgun they can own, what kind of crops they can grow on their land, things like that. They came of age sort of in the Clinton, George W. Bush era. It's a very libertarian sort of conservatism. A lot of them they are predominantly men. They are predominantly millennial, and they disproportionately have daughters. And what we have found out is that even though they're pro-life, after the Dobbs decision in 2022, they basically voted for Democrats at the top of the ballot in states where they felt like government was going to become intrusive in their daughters' lives. And the messaging, we've done subsequent research, right? Now, once they switched over to voting Republican, they voted Republican the rest of the way down the ballot, right? But they do not want their daughters being told.
You mean Democrat?
No, they voted for the Democrat at the top of the ticket.
Oh, and then
they switched.
Okay, got it.
So wherever they switch over, so it's the craziness of in a place like Western Wisconsin, where you had people who voted for Tony Evers, skipped the Senate race, and then voted for Derek Van Orton because they didn't realize the guy had actually been there on January 6th and he's in Congress. So they voted Democrat, skip Republican, wherever they switch over.
Yeah.
So the key with these guys, the single best way that we've found through the research to get them to think about it, the ones who are still wavering and they're still with Trump, is their daughters going to them and saying, Dad, you have always protected me. Which every dad, we did research on this with sons, and you have both. I only have daughters. When you ask dads of sons any age, what role do you play in their lives? They say coach, they say mentor, they say a million things. Right. When you ask a dad whether the daughter is a newborn or 68 years old, what role do you play in their life? They say protector is the number one role, right? When you ask about values for sons, it's all over the map. Hard work, frugality, whatever, honesty, etc. When they ask for daughters, it's integrity, because every dad imagines that one day, hopefully, they have somebody when they're gone of integrity that's part of their daughters' lives. But the daughters, when the daughters go to have the conversation, if the daughters come to the dads, these dads who are pro-life and all the rest, and say, Dad, I'm really concerned about abortion and what's happening or, in the country, they immediately close down. But if they come to him and they say, Dad, you've taught me that integrity is the most important thing. You've always protected me. Donald, you're not living that in backing Donald Trump. He has no integrity and he wants to take away what you taught me, which is government shouldn't be telling us what to do. Our family should be making these decisions. I should be making these decisions, just like you don't want government telling you what kind of shotgun to own. I don't want you supporting somebody who's going to tell me what choices I make. If they make the argument that way, the dads run for the hills. And if you watch Miss Americana, and that's why I say about Taylor Swift, as somebody who's watched it, that's the conversation she was having with her dad. Her dad immediately starts in and it's like, well, I bought you armored limousines and you can't do this and you'll lose half your... And she starts getting emotional in the conversation. But when she starts saying, Dad, we're Christian, we're from Tennessee, these aren't our values, he backs off because these aren't what you taught me, Dad. That though, if you empower the women that they're trying to reach, they're getting to register to vote, which is incredibly important. But if they take that next step, and provide the tools, huge. They can get help doing that, they will change the country. They will make the country more like Swifties and less like MAGA.
Trygve, I think that's a great place to end this episode. That's usually Alex's job to cut me off. That is a great place.
I'm stealing your show. I don't mean to do that, but I like the Dobbs dad's thing. So important.
No, that's why I wanted you to talk about it, because I want them to understand. I want our listeners to understand how important that is. Before we go. I remember, because Trygve and I and Alex, we talk a lot about this stuff. I remember right after, so we've known about Dobbs dads. We've been targeting them. We've been working with Trygve on it. Alex has been doing stuff. And I remember right after a day or two after the Trump-Biden debate, being on a call briefing with Trygve saying, forget Dobbs dads. They're gone.
Right.
They were gone. They want to defend their daughters, but they can't. They were suddenly, and they were moving. They were moving to us. But after that performance, it was like, no, he's not strong enough. He's not going to be there. No way. I can't do it. I'll defend her some other way because I'm not voting for Biden. So, and it's because strength is so important. They're so driven by wanting a strong leader. They want to defend their daughter, but they want a strong leader in the presidency. And
I would say they want somebody, but here's the thing, Joe. What I would say is their vision of masculinity is that integrity that they're teaching that Donald Trump is antithetical to, right? But Joe Biden, they looked at it and they're like, I have no integrity. If this man were my dad, I'd be taking the car keys from him if I support him.
Yeah. No, and what I was getting to though, because I believe that's right. You described it better than I did. Of course, you've been watching these guys for the whole year, but I think in that debate performance of Kamala Harris, she achieved what that strong leader, that president, that the value judgment that you're talking about, that with integrity, I could vote for her. I could see her as president and I can defend my daughter by voting for her. And so I think, and we'll see, but I think there's a good chance she may have actually tapped into Dobbs dads. And now if Taylor Swift and others started to empower the Swifties with the information about, talking to their fathers and getting them engaged and responding to this, then Kamala's a place that they can now be led to, whereas Biden probably was not. So anyway, I just think that's an important thing, and Trygve's helped educate myself and Alex and so many others about this dynamic, not just with Dobbs dads, but with Red Dawn Republicans who are more Reagan interested in George H.W. Bush presiding over the fall of the Soviet Union and the collapse of the wall, and do not just have a difficult time with where the party and Trump are with Putin and would stand with Ukraine, is another group out there.
Yeah.
That we'll talk about on a future show about how they're available too. But it's time to end this one. So Trygve, thanks so much for coming on. And thanks everyone for listening to That Trippi Show. Alex, hopefully will be back next week. Thanks everyone for asking us about Says Us. You can go check out the beta at sez.us and help us take back the town square. As many of you as possible, you sign up for the beta. We'll onboard you. We'll get you to join. You can help us shape the platform, make it better. It's going to be glitchy at first. All new platforms are. But if we can stay with it, we will end up changing the face of social networks so that we have a town square where we get rid of the anonymous attack dogs and trolls and can actually have conversations again that foster democracy instead of trying to tear it down which is happening on X right now. This podcast will always be free with support from our advertisers and is part of Resolute Square. So also check out the latest at resolutesquare.com/Trippi. Please subscribe to That Trippi Show and leave a review on Apple or wherever you listen. And if you're listening to this episode on YouTube, please like and subscribe to get alerts when we post the next episode. You can always send us a question to thattrippishow@gmail.com or leave us a question in a review on iTunes. We'll see you next week. Thanks, Trygve, for being with us.
Thanks for having me on, Joe.
Resolute Square.